ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to COASTER-net Update. We've got some breaking news tonight out of Buena Park, California, where we've learned that Knott's Berry Farm is indeed installing a major roller coaster in the form of Hangtime. Now, Danny, this is going to be a Gerstlauer, what they are calling dive coaster, I guess.
Okay.
It's a Gerstlauer dive coaster.
It's an infinity coaster with a holding brake. Let's call it what it is.
It's an infinity coaster with a holding brake.
That's a topic that's a discussion for another night, I think.
So I think this took us by surprise, mainly because, one, we thought it would be something a lot smaller. We were going down the road of an Intamin half pipe. At the end there, we were even speculating, an S&S free fly, mainly because of the information that we were working off of. Now, there's been a lot of conflicting reports as to what Matt We Met said in the conference call, the famous conference call where he announced these 4 roller coasters. But according to the conference call transcript that you can find, on the Cedar Fair website, it says, and I shall quote directly, that as we look to build on Cedar Fair's history, we'll be adding to our collection of world-class coasters, including a completely new type of coaster, which ended up being Railblazer, a dramatic transformation of 2 of our historical wood coasters, which was Twisted Timbers and Steel Vengeance, and a renewed relationship with a manufacturer who we have worked with recent history that will add another coaster and deepen our pool of ride manufacturers.
And that's where the disconnect is here, because you and I when we went through all the different possibilities for who this could be, we ruled out a lot of companies like B&M and GCI specifically those, because that would not be considered a renewed relationship, because those are companies that they had been working with very recently. We said anything within the last year or 2 would probably, is a current relationship. We also ruled out a few other companies for the same reason. We ruled out Zamperla because they've been doing some of the flat rides. We ruled out Larson because of, they've done a lot of the flyers and whatnot. We even ruled out Mack because of the Wild Mouse coaster that went in just a few years ago at Knott's Berry Farm. We also ruled out Gerstlauer for the simple reason that Cedar Fair just worked with Gerstlauer back in 2016 for Skyhawk at Canada's Wonderland. Now, that quote is not talking about roller coasters specifically when he talks about adding a manufacturer to their pool of ride manufacturers. He's talking about ride manufacturers. Gerstlauer, in our opinion, was already in that pool. So it seems like there is some misinformation, and I don't know, I'm not going to come out here and say that we were blatantly lied to here, but it seems like, did maybe we forget that we just worked with Gerstlauer here? And I'm saying we from the Cedar Fair perspective, we just worked with them last year. So did we kind of forget about that? And we were talking about strictly roller coasters here. And listen, I'll let you throw your 2 cents in here. I am not upset about the announcement, okay? I am happy it's not an Intamin half pipe. I am happy that we're getting something more than that. We just rode Monster about a month ago. You rode it last year as well. Monster is an absolutely fantastic roller coaster. This doesn't look to be quite as grand as Monster, I will say. But if it's anything close to Monster, it's going to be a great attraction. So I'm happy about the announcement of Hangtime. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But certainly seems like we're maybe duped a little bit.
Well, Danny, I know we've said this before. We don't have inside information. We don't have people in the park feeding us stuff. We can only speculate based on the information provided to us. And we use logical deduction to eliminate some companies to come up with what was happening. To me, Intamin still sounds like the best choice. Given all, if I had to make the guess again, I'd go with Intamin again, simply because of everything that we know. With the meeting that we know Intamin had with Cedar Point and Jason McClure, from various Twitter things, and we've done an update on that. Intamin still seems the best choice. I'm kind of shocked that they're not working with Intamin. To be honest with you, I'm a little upset they're not working with Intamin, because that kind of bodes well for the future, that Intamin's doing some great stuff over in Europe. Tyrone is just the latest in a long line of great Intamin coasters. I'm hoping they're coming back to the States. It doesn't seem likely, though, that Cedar Fair is working with them. So anyway, I digress. Let's move on.
Yeah, and it seemed like it would have been a good opportunity to do so. The only other thing that I want to mention here before we actually talk about the ride, and we'll talk about the ride briefly, is the LA Times today came out with an interesting interview where they talked to the vice president. Knott's vice president of, I want to get the title correct, vice president of maintenance and construction, Jeff Gahagan. I'm not familiar with that gentleman, actually, so I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. But he said that there was a large coaster plan for the Ghost Town area in the early 2010s that was scrapped, and part of that budget went towards funding Gatekeeper in 2013, so we know it was before then, and also revitalizing the Calico Mine Ride, the Timber Mountain Log Ride, and also revitalizing this boardwalk section. So that, to me, puts more fuel to the fire that maybe Leviathan was a design that was originally pegged for Knott's Berry Farm. And as you and I have done before, we have taken that mirror image of Leviathan and have attempted to put it in Knott's Berry Farm where it would go over parts of the Ghost Town Midway and different attractions in Ghost Town. So that would seem to maybe support that rumor that has kind of been long standing for several years, that a Knott's Hyper or a Knott's Giga was kind of tabled in favor of going to another park or funding other attractions. So I think that's an interesting point.
Well, I think more interesting is that a lot of people in this announcement were hoping for that Giga. And to me, it sounds like that idea is completely off the table at this point.
It sounds like that's never going to happen now. We've been saying, maybe this is the year Knott's gets the Giga or the Hyper. Maybe this is the year. And it seems like that this kind of almost confirms, if you ask me, that was an idea that has come and gone. And maybe that's something that, Mr. Kinzel had wanted to do. And maybe that's part of that 5-year plan we always talk about, where Matt Ouimet came in and said, you know what, we're not going to do this. We're going to do something else. And maybe that puts Gatekeeper in some context as well, that all of a sudden, they found some funds to fund Gatekeeper. So I think that's certainly interesting. Before we wrap up, why don't we actually talk about the ride here?
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? So looking at this, it is called Hangtime. We did have that right. That we pegged the Knott's ride as Hangtime. The logo has the surfer, the same surfer thing that we saw on that coaster, that we saw in the teaser, the same sort of image there. This one is very reminiscent. This Gerstlauer is very reminiscent of Takabisha over in Japan. It's got that holding brake, and I believe that's why they're calling it a dive coaster, that they have this holding brake. Now, what's funny about this is the rendering isn't actually accurate, I believe, that during the announcement, I think at one point they were planning a 90-degree drop, and now they are moving that to a 96-degree drop. That during the announcement, they made a huge deal that this was going to be a beyond vertical drop. Yeah. So we'll see how that actually pans out and when this is actually built. It looks like your standard Eurofighter here. They kept referencing Daredevil Dive and saying how this is going to beat Daredevil Dive. I found that strange.
Yeah, that seemed to be interesting, because you would think if you're going to be building, because the LA Times article talks about Monster and also Smiler. So those are kind of, I think, I haven't ridden Smiler yet. That's coming up in a couple months here, hopefully, but Monster for sure is the Gerstlauer crown jewel over here in the United States, I would think. Definitely better than any of the smaller Eurofighters / Infinity coasters that we've seen. And a lot of people have really good things to say about Smiler, and that is certainly one of the best ones as well. For them to compare it to Daredevil Dive is sort of curious, because it's a ride that probably a lot of locals don't know. The coaster folks obviously know Daredevil Dive, but Daredevil Dive is not a ride that people tend to think about when you're talking about a great coaster, or even a really good coaster. When you talk about what's the best Eurofighter, Daredevil Dive is not one people go to. People go to Monster, and some people even go to the smaller ones that have, like, a lot of people like Hydrus, the new lap bar only smaller version that's on the Jersey Shore that I got to ride earlier this year. That's a really great one. Untamed, it's basically a clone of that ride, but people kind of gravitate towards that one. So I thought that was curious that they made that comparison. But this does look bigger than the smaller ones like Hydrus and Untamed.
Yeah.
It does look like we'll have the longer train. We'll have the 4-car trains. We'll have the lap bars. So the capacity will be a little bit better here. And the lap bars are obviously a big plus. So, there's definitely potentially hope that there will be some good hang time, no pun intended, like we talk about on Monster. Monster has that beautiful pacing where you have a lot of hang time in the loops and in the inversions. This certainly looks like there's potential for that, even though it's a little higher than Monster. It isn't quite as long. It isn't quite as fast. The drop isn't quite as tall. So it'll be interesting to see how this one rides in terms of being action-packed, because Monster has a real nice length to it. Monster has real nice pacing. I'm curious to see if this one will just feel just a tad bit short.
The problem, I like the look of this ride. I like the color scheme. It's going to have the Monster lighting package on it that is going to be very different.
Yep.
That's going to change for the seasons. That looks like it's the lighting package on Monster looks amazing when you watch it. The only thing I don't like about this ride is this first drop. Monster's first drop is really outstanding. You get some real airtime coming over that hill. This is not going to have that because it's going to have this holding brake. And Danny, I don't understand why. I don't understand. I don't understand why they're doing this, because if they're doing it to call it a dive coaster and to get records, it's stupid. I don't like it that you could have a better ride experience by having a standard, lift hill.
Yeah.
Is it because they want more capacity here? Because they want the longer train and you can't whip over with the longer train? What do you see?
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. I think that could be what's happening here. Maybe they wanted the longer train. I think that's probably all it is. Again, we're seeing a lot of this year with the whole spinning thing with Silver Dollar City and the single rail. We're seeing a lot of obscure records being grabbed at this year. So
records you've never thought were there.
Yeah, I mean they're records for record's sake. They're not real records. So everybody knows that, right? So I mean, parks are just grasping at straws now because they're trying because so many parks don't want to spend the $25-30 million to put in a real record-breaking ride. So they're going to spend $10 to $15 million and try and grasp at some other records that are still going to make it just as marketable to the general public that it's a world record breaker. That's all that's really going on here. At the end of the day, my final thoughts for this here are, it's better than what I expected going into the announcement. It's a little strange based on what we thought we were getting, based on what we were told. But at the end of the day, I'm happy with the announcement. I think it'll be a good ride. It's better than what I expected. It exceeded my low expectations for this announcement. And, I'm not upset with it at all. And I think overall it's not the worst ending we could have had to the Four-Seater Fair announcements.
Yeah, there's like I said, I like the ride. I like the way it looks. There's a lot of stuff that leaves a sour taste in my mouth, like you were saying on other stuff.
Yep.
It's the way it was the information we were given. It's that first drop. It's calling it a dive coaster, which
that's the biggest thing you have a problem with. I've kind of brushed that off, and I'm like, okay, call it whatever you want.
You know what? And I because the reason why I have a problem with it, and I don't even have a problem with it from the perspective of the park saying it, because they're just marketing this, so they're calling it a dive coaster, fine, whatever. I have a problem with all the enthusiasts just lining up and agreeing with it. Enthusiasts that love to complain when they hear GP call a coaster the wrong name. These same enthusiasts are now lining up and are perfectly okay with calling this a dive coaster all of a sudden. Like, come on. Like, sure, it has a holding brake. It has a dive section. But no one has ever called this a dive coaster. We've seen models like this before. The park wants to do it. That's fine. But you know what? Whatever.
All right. Well, we'll see how it is. So, all right.
Okay, so hopefully, coincidentally, I will be getting out to Knott's to ride this next year.
Well,
I got
there
a
you
whole
go.
California
We'll
trip
see what you
planned,
have to say about it.
so I'll get to ride this, and I'll be able to compare it to Monster, which is in my top 20 rides. I love that ride. So we'll see how this one stacks up. And this kind of like officially ends our big Cedar Fair announcements. But Danny,
We'll have another show all about the entire thing. Don't you guys worry.
yeah, and
We'll get there.
also we've got Six Flags stuff lined up
Well,
already.
that's
Six
coming up
Flags,
next, right?
Six Flags
So.
has started up already. We're ready to go. So there will be no shortage of updates in the future here. So, of course,
All right.
I'm always Andy Robarchuk from Chicago, Illinois.
Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And right on, Ride Warriors.
See you guys.